You could have video evidence, 3 witnesses, and a signed confession, and they'd still find a way to make it your fault. If you've ever wondered why some people would rather set themselves on fire than admit they were wrong, what I'm about to tell you explains everything. I'm your friend from Mindly, where we break down the psychology behind everyday behaviors. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why certain people can't apologize, what's happening in their brain when they're clearly wrong, and most importantly, how to stop letting their defensiveness mess with your head. Because here's the thing, this isn't about stubbornness. It's about something way deeper. The invisible shield. Let's talk about defensive ego protection. Sounds fancy, right? But it's actually pretty simple. Some people have built such a fragile sense of self that admitting they're wrong feels like psychological death. I'm not exaggerating. To them, saying I'm sorry isn't just owning a mistake. It's admitting they're fundamentally flawed as a human being. Here's what makes this so frustrating. These aren't necessarily bad people. They're not sitting around plotting how to avoid accountability. Most of them genuinely don't see what they're doing. Their brain has created this automatic defense system that activates the second they feel threatened. And admitting fault? That's threat level midnight. The psychology behind this goes back to childhood. Maybe they grew up in an environment where mistakes were met with harsh criticism or rejection. Maybe they learned that being wrong meant being worthless. So their brain developed this survival mechanism: protect the ego at all costs. Even if it costs them every meaningful relationship they have. What it actually sounds like. You want to know how to spot this? Listen to their language. Here's what defensive ego protection sounds like in real life. I wouldn't have yelled if you hadn't pushed my buttons. Notice how that works? They're not denying they yelled. They're just making it your fault they did. I'm sorry you feel that way. That's not an apology. That's them telling you your feelings are the problem, not their actions. Well, you're not perfect either. Classic deflection. You bring up something they did, and suddenly it's a greatest hits compilation of your mistakes from 2019. That's not how I remember it. Reality becomes negotiable when their ego is on the line. Your experience doesn't matter if it contradicts their self-image. You're too sensitive. Translation. The problem isn't what I did, it's how you reacted to it. I was just joking, why can't you take a joke? They hurt you, and now you're the bad guy for having feelings about it. See the pattern? Every single one of these phrases has something in common. They shift responsibility away from themselves and onto you, the situation, or some external factor. Anything to avoid that terrifying moment of admitting they were wrong. The story of James. Let me tell you about James. He's sitting at the dinner table with his wife, Lisa, and she's trying to talk to him about something he said that hurt her feelings. Simple, right? But watch what happens. Lisa says, "When you told your parents I was being dramatic about my job stress, that really hurt me." James's face immediately changes. His jaw tightens. And here's what comes out. "I never said that." "You're twisting my words." Lisa pulls out her phone. She literally has the text thread where he said it. You'd think this is where he apologizes, right? Wrong. James looks at the text and says, "Well, you were being dramatic. I was just being honest with my parents." Then comes the real kicker. "Besides, you told your sister I was being lazy last month, so we're even." Lisa isn't looking for even. She's looking for acknowledgement. But James's brain won't let him go there. Because in his mind, admitting he was wrong about this one thing means admitting he's a bad husband. His ego can't handle the difference between "I did something hurtful" and "I am a hurtful person." So he fights. He deflects. He brings up old issues. anything to avoid those two simple words. I'm sorry. 3 hours later, they're still arguing. Not about the original issue anymore, but about 17 other things James brought up to avoid the first one. And Lisa goes to bed feeling crazy, wondering if maybe she is too sensitive. That's what defensive ego protection does. It doesn't just protect the ego, it gaslights everyone around it. How this plays out everywhere. This behavior doesn't stay contained. It leaks into every area of their life. At work, they're the person who blames the team when a project fails but takes full credit when it succeeds. They'll throw a coworker under the bus before they'll admit they missed a deadline. Their emails are masterclasses in subtle blame shifting. "Per my last email" becomes their catchphrase, because it lets them be right without directly calling someone else wrong. In friendships, they're exhausting. You can't have a real conversation with them about anything they did that bothered you. Try it, and suddenly you're attacking them. You're being unfair. You're bringing up old stuff. They'll end the friendship before they'll examine their behavior. Because maintaining the friendship requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires admitting imperfection. Here's where it gets really dark. In romantic relationships, this behavior is toxic. Your partner literally cannot repair harm because they cannot acknowledge harm. Every argument becomes about defending their innocence rather than healing the hurt. You stop bringing things up because you know it'll turn into a 3-hour debate about reality itself. So you swallow your feelings. You question your perceptions. You start to wonder if maybe you're the problem. You're not. What's actually happening in their brain? So what's going on inside their head when you're trying to get a simple apology? Their amygdala, the brain's fear center, is going absolutely crazy. To them, your request for an apology registers as a threat. Not a social threat. A survival threat. Their brain literally can't tell the difference between admit you were wrong about dinner plans and admit you're worthless as a human being. This triggers what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. They have two conflicting pieces of information. I'm a good person and I did something hurtful. Normal, healthy people can hold both these truths. They can think, I'm generally good, and I messed up here. But people with defensive ego protection can't do that. The dissonance is too painful. So their brain resolves it by rejecting the second truth entirely. They didn't mess up. You're wrong. Reality is wrong. They're fine. There's also something called the fundamental attribution error working here. When they mess up, it's because of circumstances beyond their control. When you mess up, it's because of your character flaws. They were late because of traffic. You were late because you're irresponsible. They forgot your birthday because they're stressed. You forgot theirs because you don't care. See how that works? The cost nobody talks about. Here's what most people miss about this behavior. It doesn't just hurt the people around them. It absolutely destroys the person doing it. They can't grow. They can't learn. They can't develop genuine intimacy. Because all of those things require the ability to be wrong, to be seen, to be imperfect. Think about it. Every time they refuse to apologize, they're training the people in their life to stop being honest with them. Eventually, nobody tells them when they've screwed up. Not because they're perfect, but because it's not worth the fight. So they end up surrounded by people who are quietly resentful, or they end up alone, wondering why nobody sticks around. And inside, deep down, they know something's wrong. But their ego protection is so strong that they can't see what it is. So they blame everyone else. They're not the problem, everyone else is just too sensitive, too critical, too demanding. The twist you need to understand. But here's what'll blow your mind. Most people with this pattern genuinely believe they do apologize. They'll tell you, I apologize all the time. And technically, they might say the words. But there's always a but attached. I'm sorry, but you. I apologize, but if you hadn't. That's not an apology. That's a justification wearing an apology costume. A real apology has 3 parts. Acknowledgement of what you did. Understanding of how it affected the other person. And commitment to doing better. I'm sorry I snapped at you. I can see that hurt your feelings and made you feel unimportant. I'm working on managing my stress better so I don't take it out on you. 23 words. But for someone with defensive ego protection, might as well be asking them to climb Everest naked. Myths and truths. Myth 1. They're just confident and don't let people push them around. Truth. Confidence is being secure enough to admit when you're wrong. This is insecurity masquerading as strength. Myth 2. They'll apologize when they're actually wrong about something serious. Truth. The bigger the mistake, the harder they fight against admitting it. The stakes just make their defense system stronger. Myth 3. If you just explain it better, they'll understand and apologize. Truth. They understand. They just can't emotionally afford to admit it. More explanation just gives them more to argue against. Myth 4. They're doing this on purpose to manipulate you. Truth. Most people with this pattern aren't consciously manipulative. They've just built such a strong defense system they can't see past it. That doesn't make it okay, but it explains why talking to them feels like talking to a wall. Myth 5. You can love them enough to make them change. Truth. They have to want to change. And they won't want to change until maintaining their ego protection costs them more than dropping it. Sometimes that means losing everyone who matters. What this means for you. So what do you do with this information? First, stop trying to get them to see reality. You can't logic someone out of a position they didn't logic themselves into. This is emotional, not rational. Presenting more evidence, explaining your feelings more clearly, crying, yelling, none of it works. Because the issue isn't that they don't understand. It's that they can't afford to admit it. Second, protect yourself. Set boundaries around what you'll tolerate. You can't make them apologize, but you can decide you're not going to engage in 3-hour circular arguments. You can say, I've told you how this affected me. Whether you acknowledge it or not is up to you, but I'm done discussing it. Then actually be done. Third, recognize this isn't about you. Their inability to apologize says nothing about whether you deserve an apology. It says everything about their relationship with themselves. You're not too sensitive. You're not asking too much. You're asking for basic human decency, and they can't give it because they don't have it for themselves. And if you're dealing with this in a close relationship, a partner, a parent, a best friend, you've got a decision to make. Can you live with never getting real apologies? Can you live with someone who will defend themselves at the cost of your peace? Some people say yes, and they find ways to cope. Some people say no, and they walk away. Both choices are valid. Just make sure you're choosing consciously, not hoping they'll magically become someone they're not. If you recognize this pattern in yourself, first, good for you. Self-awareness is the first step. Talking to a therapist can really help you understand why your brain goes into defense mode and how to feel safe enough to be wrong sometimes. Because here's the truth, being wrong doesn't make you worthless. Being unable to admit it does make you lonely. Now you know how to spot defensive ego protection and why it happens. The next time someone can't apologize to you, you'll understand it's not about you being wrong or too sensitive. It's about them being trapped in a prison of their own ego. And that's not your job to fix. If this helped you see things differently, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one.